Okay, everybody, welcome to Circle of Wine Writers Let's Talk series number 126. Today's topic is let's talk about the emergence of English wine, successes and challenges with Sam Linter. I'd obviously like to extend a welcome to our members, those who are just joining for the first time, and obviously our non-members as well. The Circle was founded in 1960 in the UK, and the membership now is split 50-50 between the UK and overseas. About 270 plus members, comprising of communicators, educators, broadcasters, wine writers, and other professionals. More information about the Circle on the website, and also you can join online from there. Please do visit if they're of interest. I would now like to hand over to Liz Saggies, Circle committee member, and also the lady in charge of organising these events. Over to you, Liz.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone. It's an enormous pleasure to introduce Sam. I've known her for a very, very long time. And what's rather special about her, apart from all her achievements in English wine, is that she's one of the rare people to have really been born into English wine. It's such a new industry, yet Sam's parents were among the pioneers in the 1970s, establishing commercial vineyards with Bolney Estate. And Sam took over from them running the estate until it grew from a small family vineyard to a big operation, winning lots of international awards, and a few years back was sold to Freshnet. So at which stage Sam moved on, and since just over 2 years ago she joined Plumpton College as head of wine. But she's also been involved heavily with Wine GB. She's just stood down as director, and she's been involved with sustainability. She's always passionate about quality. She's been very important in the movement towards still wines as well as sparkling wines. And so there's hardly anyone, I think, better able to speak about English wine to us. So over to you, Sam.
Thank you very much, Liz. That's very kind. Hello, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen, which should work, or maybe not. Yep, is that working okay? Can everybody see that? Yeah?
No, not yet.
Not yet?
No.
Okay, it worked perfectly when we practiced earlier on, so it's not going to do it now, is it? Let's try again. Right, anything yet?
Not yet.
No, it's gone completely wrong, hasn't it?
Yes, it was absolutely fine earlier.
It was. There was me being too cocky, wasn't I? Saying, oh, yes, I can do these things.
Well, justifiably so, because it was perfect.
Yeah. Let's try that.
There we go.
Yeah, perfect. We've got it. Great. Perfect. Finally, apologies for that. So I'm Sam. Really lovely to be invited to talk to you all. And I thought it'd be really interesting just to explore how we got here, as what started, certainly when I was first involved in it, as a little bit of a novelty and seen as a novelty, to what is now one of Europe's fastest growing wine regions. And I wanted to explore why that is, what the major successes are that we have seen as our industry, certainly in the last sort of 10, 15, 20 years. And now its major challenges it faces, some of which we've always faced and we've not overcome, and some which are new. And how we overcome those challenges with the innovations in tech, agri-tech, sensors and data are starting to help industry adapt. And we're starting to see that in our industry. And can that help us move forward? So that's what I would like to talk about, and just move on. Make sure I can actually change. Sorry, bear with me a second. Can't even change the presentation now. No. Right. So why industry matters. In the past 30 years, we have seen it going from curiosity, as I said earlier, to credibility. There is better quality of what we're producing. And actually, I think what English producers have done really well over this time that the industry's been going, it's fairly nascent, you know, the last 50 to 60 years, but I would say it's only the last really 20 years. It's really 20 to 30 years. It's really started to understand what it needs to do in the vineyard, viticulturally and with the winemaking. And we've now seen, because of that, because we've had the successes and we've won the awards, we've now seen people starting to invest in the industry. And people have come in with money and they've invested in planting vineyards and starting up wine brands. And we could probably name quite a few. Raffini Wine Estate would be a really good example of that, among many. And some international people like Domaine Evermont, with Taschenjäger, they're coming in and planting as well. But what's been really critical to this is the investors and the ability to borrow money from investors as well, banks and other lenders. So that's been really important because we've not had that before. And I think that held the industry back for many years. As we know, sparkling wines lead the way, roughly 2/3 of sparkling wines, but you're now seeing that still wines are coming through more and more. And watch that space. You will see more English still wines, especially from the Essex and the Southeast, coming on board. Chardonnay, Pinot Noir are the typical grape varieties, and Bacchus, as we know. And I think it says it there on the screen. There's almost 5,000 hectares planted in the UK. Move that on. So looking at those drivers of success, one of the things that's really, really helped us is the research and development that's been done in viticulture and in wine production. And that's grown significantly in recent years. Now, that's been driven by climate change, rising consumer demand, and the ambition to position English wine as a premium product globally. So we're exporting more than we ever have now. Now we're tiny. We're still less than 2% production-wise. We're probably around 1% of what's drunk in this country that we're actually producing. So we're tiny. But we've gone from exporting of that we actually make 2% up to almost 15% now. So we're beginning to get a little bit of recognition globally. You may ask, do we need to export? Possibly not. But I think the feeling in the industry, it's good for brand recognition of our product to not just be a homegrown and home drunk product. It's seen still as a luxury product, but with the strong branding we've got, the more professional management of vineyards and wineries and wine brands, and I said that research investment that's been coming in, and the training that's coming, and the education that's coming out. Plumpton College has been, I'm here at Plumpton, but it's been going since 1989. And been training people in the industry. I don't think there's many wine brands in the UK that do not have a Plumpton alumni in them. And then NIAB at East Malling have done a really good job as well with that. So you're seeing that. It's been a perfect storm of opportunity, which has been great for the industry. Now, that has brought its own problems because it's gone really quickly. But what it has done, it's made government sit up and realise that we are actually an industry that maybe they could be investing in. So there's still very little money and support coming in for English wines, English Welsh wines, or British wines, as WineGB are now looking to own the term British or UK wines. And I know arguably we have British wines and that's a completely different product, but they're trying to own that as naming the term for us. But the government are actually starting to see that maybe they can invest a little bit on the research and development. And you're seeing some money trickling through from different grants, like Innovate as an example, and coming from more from Science and Technology Department, DSIT, Science and Technology Department, places like that, rather than from DEFRA. But that money is trickling through and it is actually helping. So that's really good. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. But the challenges, what are the challenges? Well, weather, obviously, we all know that. And but mostly, I'm not going to talk too much about weather. I think we know about that, and I will talk about it a little bit. Economics in this country, and this is where I think the biggest issue comes in, and this is what I'd like to be the second half of my talk to really explore. Planting and land values are expensive. The capital intensity of planting a vineyard anywhere in the world, but especially in the UK, is high. There is a cooling demand in the luxury end of the wine product we are seeing for post-pandemic. Certainly the economic climate at the moment is not great for selling wine. We know about hospitality challenges. There has been a surplus from the 2023 harvest. There is a surplus. We had a very poor harvest in 24, but so many more vineyards are now planting. We have that. And there's so much, well, how to describe it? There's probably about a quarter to a fifth, something like that, of new plantings that have gone in out of that almost 5,000 hectares aren't producing yet, but they will do in the next 1 to 3 years. And given the fact that we have a glut of product available at the moment, what does that look like? And we need to keep pushing those sales through. Sales are rising year on year, and we've been here before. 10, 15 years ago, I remember there being a concern within industry that we were going to have way too much stock and not enough sales, and that evened itself out, and it may well happen again. But it's something, there's a challenge that the industry needs to be very cognizant of and not ignore. Interest rates have risen, and that's making it really hard. Vineyards of wine brands have leveraged a lot of funding, especially to bottle the 2023 harvest. And as sales have softened, they're down about 20%, say, because the economic climate, with interest rates rising, it's made it really hard, and that's biting people at the moment. And we have this vintage volatility. We have microclimate extremes. We have a longer growing season now, so we're getting our buds are budding even earlier, 2, 3, sometimes 4 weeks earlier than we've seen previously, and that can bring us further into that long frost season in early spring, late winter, early spring. We know the humidity from rain, it can give disease pressure as well. So we really need to think about how we manage that. And there's been some experiments done about that. There were, Plumpton worked with Adviclum back in the 2020s to put some loggers, data loggers in our vineyard and to just see what the vineyard temperature is doing, the intra-vineyard temperature and how it changed. It changes a lot, actually, and they did put many in, so it's actually quite interesting. So we don't really know enough about what's happening in the vineyard, is my point, and I will talk more about this. Disease pressure in years like 2024 was awful. And we need to be more sustainable as an industry. We need to be more sustainable. We need to be doing more with the regenerative viticulture movement. The Regenerative Viticulture Foundation is doing this one block challenge. There are a handful of English vineyards doing it. Could we all be doing it? Yes. But how can we train and educate ourselves to feel confident enough to actually get more involved in sustainability? That said, WineGB has its Sustainable Wines of Great Britain accreditation, and a lot of vineyards are actually doing it. So whilst there's between 35 and 40 wine brands that are doing it, those wine brands cover a lot of the vineyards planted, the hectarage planted. So it's we are in a good space, and we can't say that we're not. As we know, aging sparkling wine, same around the world. Aging sparkling wine for many years is expensive. It ties up capital, and you've got to pay for it to be stored, whether it's your own or somebody else's storage. And as I just briefly mentioned earlier, hospitality, we all know, is not doing very well at the moment. But actually, the UK wine industry relies on hospitality. On-trade is a very strong area for us selling our product, because our product is at that more premium end price-wise. We're not able to sell volume in as much in supermarkets and the chain wine brands, wine sales brands. And I mentioned the cost of wine, the cost of land being expensive. Strutt & Parker have recently posted that to plant on a vine-ready site can cost anything from £37,000 to £74,000 a hectare. And if you buy an established vineyard, it's actually selling at the moment around 124,000 a hectare. Now, I'm going to caution that whilst that's the research they did, I will caution that and say that is of the vineyards that are selling. There are some vineyards that aren't selling, so I do think that figure is slightly skewed. But Strutt & Parker have actually put that out. So we know mistakes in site choice are expensive if you don't pick the right site, and some people don't, but a lot of people do, and that's better than it ever was, which is good. Just to really briefly talk about this, and I think this is a really key point for us. Our yields are too low for us to be economically sustainable. Champagne is around 10 to 12 tonnes a hectare. The worst English vineyards could be a third to a half less than Champagne. The top 25% of English vineyards actually are not far off. They're sort of 8 to 10 tonnes a hectare, but too many are sitting in that lower end, and that makes it really hard for people to be commercially viable. So that really then goes really neatly into, we've had really great successes, we've got lots of challenges. So why are our yields volatile? What is causing the problem? Why is it that we're not getting our yields up? Obvious things like spring frost, 2021, vineyards across the UK, greater than 50% of them had losses. When it's 2012, the vintage completely collapsed in the UK due to rain. I remember at Bolney, we had a little bit of Rondo, and our Rondo actually managed to flower just before those heavy rains came in. But everything else after that went, and I know it did with many other vineyards. So almost nothing was produced in 2012. Last year, you can all remember last year, not a great summer, lots of rain. We got a lot of downy mildew. And it meant that the vineyards were having to spray a lot more to protect against it, or to try to keep it from getting worse. And that's bad for the environment. It's bad for cost of producing the grapes as well. We can have uneven ripening in marginal years. This is very common in the UK. We've got a lot of new growers coming into the industry, and these new growers, some of them are coming to places like Plumpton or Niab, and they're learning how to run a vineyard. Some of them are using consultants who know how to run vineyards, and some of them just aren't. So we still have some people that are running a vineyard on little knowledge, and that is a shame, because they're taking a long time to get it right. And when you spend as much as you spend to plant a vineyard, I do find it quite surprising that people don't just invest a little bit in education to know how to do it the best they can. And the labour costs are really expensive. Since Brexit, we've found it almost impossible, unless you're a very large brand, to have overseas labour to come in and to pick or to prune for you. We know that's mostly going into other areas of agriculture, and even they are struggling as well. And if you're a medium to a small vineyard and you want people to come and pick from you from Eastern Europe, for instance, you won't get any. If there are any available, they will go to the larger brands. So we're not seeing it. And also for the input costs, and I think something that's really important, when you've had a bad harvest, you don't necessarily the following year have the funds that you've gained from either selling the grapes or selling the wine you've made to really look after your vineyard going forwards. And sometimes you can see this really vicious circle for growers where they've struggled a little bit in the previous year, their funds aren't in the bank in order to do what they need to do in the next year, and then maybe they cut corners, and once they cut corners they get caught in this vicious circle of the vines being unproductive, getting more disease, and that is actually quite damaging. So the next thing I really want to talk about, this leads quite nicely on, is, well, okay, so what can we now do to improve vineyard yields? What is available out there and what actually can be done? We know English wine is a success. We know that we work really, really hard to improve the quality of what we've done. We know we've been winning lots of international awards. We get lots of gold medals. We get lots of trophies. We do really well side by side in tastings, and then you all will have heard of that. We know that we've been growing. We've been riding a crest of a wave on sales over the last few years, and some wine brands have done extremely well, which, as I said earlier, it's why you're getting a lot of these investors coming in, because they've seen the success that's been there. They've seen that we can We can, when we do it right, make a really good product. But my concern for the industry going forward is if we can't improve our vineyard yields, are we going to be commercially sustainable? And can we be commercially sustainable as an industry growing when we can grow to the capacity that we could if we are only selling at the premium end or the luxury end of the market? And should we not, as an industry, this is a question I'm posing, this question I ask myself all the time, and this is what I believe, we should be selling in that medium segment of the market. I don't think English's wine is ever going to be at the bottom end. I don't think you ever see anything between £5 and £10 a bottle for English wine, but we certainly could be selling in the more medium area of the market. And our wine prices, whilst they can be at the top end for the really good wines, we should also be making wines that sit in that middle section. So we have ability for more volume sales going forward with the amount of plantings that are going in and want to carry on going in. So that's sort of my opinion of where we are. And my opinion, therefore, is, okay, how can we do that? We can only do it if we increase yields. So if I go back to the previous slide, we are a third to a half of most of our vineyards are a third to a half of what Champagne, just using this for sparkling, I've not even got to still, of what Champagne is managing to yield. That is not commercially viable. Not if we want to sell bigger volume at a lower price point. So how can we improve that? Vineyard site selection. We need to make sure that everybody is educated, and especially new people coming into the industry, that they are choosing the best sites. It's not just a question of, oh, I've got a field or I've just bought my neighbour's field. It should be a question of, I've gone out and done, using Night Timber as a model. Night Timber are great. When I don't know if you know much about Night Timber and the Mosses when they first came to UK, they spent months, if not a couple of years, going round with Jean-Manuel Jacquinot from House Jacquinot in Epinay, looking for the best site in the UK before they decided to plant. And they spent that time making sure that they got that right. And the existing Night Timber site was a good site, some green sand, nicely draining soil, good slope, good aspect. And they worked hard to get that right. All too often, we're finding that people are finding land and saying, oh, that's great, I'm going to plant on there, without getting it right first. And I find that surprising when you have to pay so much money. So that is a really good thing. We should be making sure we educate, and YGB as well, not just the educators, but YGB, and making sure we educate. There are courses people can go on to find out about that. YGB itself has a new entrance guide, which can help them about that and send them off in the right direction. But all too often, people are not going those routes. And there are climate mapping tools. There is a vine map, and there's Adviclum data out there that people can use to find those good sites as well. So we should really be looking at that, really important. And then precision monitoring with sensors. We should be looking at temperature, soil. We should be looking at leaf wetness and canopy management. And those are sensors that are actually in active now. And some vineyards are doing it. And I'll talk a little bit later about some of the case studies of research that's being done around these. So they are existing. We need to work more with that, and people need to know more about that. And we need more sensors as well. We need to do much better with our canopy. Are we getting the right light interception and airflow coming through? Because obviously we know that helps reduce disease. Are we getting the nutrition right in the vines, and are we managing our soils properly? Sometimes yes, and the top 25% of vineyards that have the right yields, or nearly the right yields, are doing that. Too many of us aren't, unfortunately. And pruning, do we know enough about pruning? So we've done a lot in the UK. We've done a lot to move forward. We've done a lot to really look at the quality and the ripeness levels, but we seem to have forgotten that with that has to come increased yield. Frost is another one. Are we managing frost well enough? Should we be managing frost, or shouldn't we be planting in frost pockets in the first place, or a frost crisp area? Obviously, if it's an air frost, you can't do much about that, but ground frosts, actually, on the whole, if you're planting with the right aspect in the right area, you shouldn't have to do minimum frost protection. And that's expensive. Frost protection, we know it's not very environmentally friendly as well. And actually, can we spray in a better way? Can we use data-driven disease models based on temperature, humidity, and leaf wetness to think about what we spray and when we spray, rather than blanket spraying everything? And there are sensors out there to help do that as well. And I'm going to just challenge this as well, because this always is going around my head continually. Are we right in the world, not just the UK? And I'd love if anybody's got any thoughts of that to share at the end. Are we right hanging on to Vitis vinifera vines? Are we right to keep planting Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier? Or should we be looking at the higher yielding clones and the disease resistant hybrid varieties like the peewee varieties? There are some really good peewee varieties that are producing really nice wines, but we all ignore them because it's hybrid. Plumpton has planted 20 peewee varieties. I know there's some other vineyards in the UK, and NIAB, the Wine Innovation Centre at NIAB, have been doing some experiments with these, and there's some pretty nice, some really good grapes, vine types out there that are making some really nice wines. Should we, as an industry, and that means all of us, get behind varieties that are disease resistant, that do need less looking after, that's got to be better environmentally and have to be better for economic sustainability as well, rather than just carrying on with the Vitis vinifera, because we all, including myself, consider those to be the best. Could these others be as good if we get our heads around that? And that's a challenge I'd really like people's opinions on, because I keep looking at it and think, are we just not seeing the obvious answer there? And that's not just the UK, that's worldwide. So data has to enter the story. Data matters. I've just been talking a little bit about that, but using sensors and analytics, vineyards can move from reactive management to predictive management and make precise decisions. Thinking of turning every vine into a data point for smarter services, for smarter choices. The holy grail, as I said, has to be increasing yield to commercially viable levels without compromising quality. So there are sensors in fields. We're not using enough of them. We need more sensors to start recording different things. We're not doing illuminance, irradiance. We can do wind speed, but we don't always do it. We can do temperature. Are we doing waterlogging? Are we doing compaction in the soil? All of these different things we could be doing. And if we've got enough data in the vineyard, enough data sensors in the vineyard, we can actually see in those little microclimates around every vine what's happening. And one of the Adviclem, and I'll talk about it in a little bit, the study they did, the case study they did, they actually proved that actually there's such intervariation across the vineyard with temperature. It was quite surprising. And we're not looking at that. So I think that's what's missing. And I also think all the case studies and the research that has been done so far, nobody has pulled it together, certainly not in the UK. We don't really fully understand exactly what's happening in the UK in our vineyards, but there is evidence and research out there that could tell us if we pull that together and we just get that missing information in. So just talked about these, but these are just some of the things that you can currently test for in the UK, or currently being tested for in UK vineyards. Modern vineyards in the UK, they're collecting the data across all of those, temperature, humidity, soil, and canopy health. Canopy health is the key thing. How are we knowing our canopies are healthy? The leaves are healthy. They're healthy enough to photosynthesize and to ripen the grapes. They're healthy enough to not be attracting disease as well, or getting diseased. And then what are we using with ground sensors? And can we use drones? Will the UK government allow us to license drones for spraying? Because a drone could go and spot spray when something just starts in a vineyard and stop it spreading without having to go and blanket spray an area. And that has to be a win for me. So if we can get that 3D holistic view of what's going in a vineyard, imagine just what we could do, not just in the UK, around the world as well, actually. And case study, this is the one I've just been talking about. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing this Adviclem correctly, but we'll go with that. And that was something that was done way before my time at Plumpton College, with the amazing Chris Foss was there at the time, and he invited them in, and they only put 15 data loggers around our 6.5 hectare vineyard. but they did look at those microclimate variations, and they discovered there was huge variation within that 6.5 acres. Now, most vineyards will look at that and they will say, when they're looking at a vineyard, they say, oh, I've got a bit of disease, I'll just spray the whole thing. So we always treat vineyards, one vineyard as a whole. And actually what this was trying to tell you is you can't do that, because different things are happening at different places at different times, even within just a hectare or even just an acre. So how do you manage that? And that was a great study. It didn't really go any further, unfortunately. And I've actually worked out, we've done some work because we're looking at doing a new project at Plumpton, that actually you probably need over 130 sensors, data logger sensors, as a minimum in a 10-hectare vineyard. So 6.5 hectare vineyard, you're probably looking, I don't know, 70, 80. So this is way under the amount that you need to get the right, to really get the data we were looking for. But it's a good study, and it's a study that was done in the UK, and one of the early studies actually looking at what's happening in English and Welsh vineyards, rather than relying on the information we get from our European partners and telling us what's happening in their vineyards. It's relevant to what's happening in ours. It's a completely different climate. So we're not using the right information to inform us. And then there's a current case study that's going on at the moment. This has been done by YNGB, Vinescapes, Plumpton, Vinewatch, amongst others. And this is a really good project. It's a frost project, and getting data sensors in the vineyards to actually look at frost and tying that with weather stations that predict frost risk, so frost warning ones, and actually are they accurate enough to, and are the sensors in the vineyard informing something different or something earlier than the actual weather stations are. Unfortunately, this project hasn't worked quite as well, I think, as we'd all have liked to have seen it, because the last 2 years it's been running, we've barely had any frost in the UK. But it has informed us of where the temperature differences are coming in between the weather stations sat in the vineyard somewhere, and then the more regional weather stations and the data loggers within the vineyard. So we have learned quite a lot from that. But again, how is that information be pulled into a wider study, and how is it going to be used? And then the NIAB East Malling. So this at NIAB at East Malling, there's a wine innovation hub, and the research there is done by Belinda Kemp, who studied in the UK but went to Oregon, and she did her PhD in Oregon at Brockville University in Oregon, and she's a real data scientist, and she's a clever lady. I'm so sure some of you may know her. But this is interesting because it's the first time it fully replicated viticultural research. So it has the first fully replicated viticulture research site, and they're testing anything from canopy management to biodiversity sensors that literally listen to soil life. And that's model for sustainable innovation. And again, it's working towards regenerative viticulture, and that's what they're tying that research into. And they had some Kent vineyards got involved in supporting in this and being part of the project. So you see this, and you see, as I've been saying, there are different pockets of these research being done, and people are learning things. But as an industry, we need to put all of this information together. We need to look at what's missing. We need to add and fill in those gaps. And then we need to then create advice and dashboards that people can use, and almost like an oven ready pack, in my opinion, of well, these are the data sensors that you need to put in your vineyard, and this is what it will tell you, and this is what you need to do when you see it. And we can do some training courses on it, and we can do some consultancy on it. But if as an industry pull together and do that, we can actually turn things around really quickly, I think. So Plumpton is working. We've just got some funding via DSIT, excuse me, and we are going to use that funding to put those sensors in our new vineyard. We're in the process of planting in order to fill those gaps in, but also to do what's already been done and pull the data in and replicate it and put it all together and work with others in the same field that have already been doing this, so we can all work together. If we can do that, I think that could be quite interesting. So just to go through the benefits that the work that's been done has done, we've got we've got those the early adopters of these benefits, those are using it, have reported less crop loss. They've got better disease control, and they've got improved quality consistency year on year. Data isn't replacing the viticulturists, it's starting to give them superpowers. And I really like that. I think if you've got that information, you almost do have superpowers because you can act on it in a really predictive way. But we still have remaining challenges. Excuse me a second. Not every vineyard can afford these systems. So collecting the data and working out what it is we should be doing, and then simplifying it so that growers can then afford to put it in, and it's simple enough for them to do and train them to do, is going to be key to the broader adoption of including these cost-effective options in the UK. And we now need more. And I talked about filling those gaps, and those gaps are sensors. We need more weather stations, we need more field sensors, we need more camera traps, we need more pest monitoring than we've currently got, and we certainly need soil probes that look at temperature, moisture, salinity, water tension, and so on. And also the connectivity. If you've got sensors in the ground in a field in the middle of a lot of other fields, how do you get that data back? And the LoRaWAN masts now actually are doing really good data transmission. It can come back into 3G, 4G, or 5G broadband in people's offices, homes, or wherever. And that's working really, really well. So my takeaways. Well, we have in the UK Vine Maps, Vinescapes, Alistair Nesbitt, mapped the whole of the UK to see where the most viable vineyard land was. What is the potential that we have for planting? And he, with this study, identified 33,000 hectares of land suitable for viticulture. We're only at just under 5. So we have an amazing opportunity to keep growing the industry. We have to focus on still wine. Some people are saying we should focus on regional identity, regional PDOs. Having been involved in the Sussex one, I think it's the wrong thing to do at the moment. Whether it will ever be the right thing, I doubt it. So I've gone 180 on that myself over the last few years. And to do that, just to give us a takeaway, if we get the digital and data right, then we have sustainable viticulture. We can keep improving the quality of what we do. We can increase the yield to be sustainable, and we can be healthier in our vineyards and look after our soil, look after our biodiversity, and stop putting lots of sprays on vineyard. And wouldn't it be amazing if the UK could do that in its slightly more challenging climate and show an example? And working with regenerative viticulture feels really important to me to do that. So I'm just about the time I wanted to, so I'm quite pleased with that. So thank you. If anybody is interested in what we're doing or what I've been talking about as far as collecting data and pulling it together in a way that actually industry can use, or you know anybody that would be interested in working in that area, please do come and talk to me. I'll put my details up there, but please do come and talk to me. I'd love to talk to people about it. I'm really passionate about that. I'm really passionate about the English and Welsh wine industry, or the UK wine industry. It's still very confused what it's trying to call itself. It wants to be called British wine because actually really we're Great Britain. We feel that that's what we should own, but obviously we know there is British wine still around. So it is trying to own that space, but I'm passionate about that. It is an industry that's fought hard over 50, 60 years to get to where it has. It's learnt a huge amount and it's gained a lot of ground, and it's making some brilliant, brilliant wines. And we've done so well doing that. We've gained lots of investment, and yeah, everybody's worked really hard at doing that. And it feels there's just this one thing, which is quite a significant thing, to resolve. And if we resolve that, I'm not saying there's not other challenges, there will be, of course there will be, but if we can resolve the yield issue, and I believe we absolutely can, I think we've got an industry that's sustainable for the future, and I think that'd be great. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sam. Your question about should we be hanging on to Vitis vinifera vines has created quite a response.
I thought it might. I thought I'd be, provocative.
Stephen Skelton is here with us, so he has answered some of the questions or provided his take on or his thoughts on some of the questions or comments that have been made. Just as a response, Ken Sheath posted saying that when you were talking about production, he was saying that Poulton Hill Estate near Cheltenham reported in 2024 3,749 kilograms. Now in 2025, 24,247 kilograms. So that's quite an increase there.
That's an increase, yeah. Is that because of the vineyards was very young and now it's more mature? They planted more vines, or they just got their heads around what they need to do and they're collecting the information they need to do a better job? I don't know. Yeah, sorry, there's lots of questions there. Sorry,
Ken's there.
I can't answer that question, Sam, but the website doesn't show the vineyard area, but they have 9,750 vines.
Oh, okay, right, yeah. So that depends on planting density, obviously, but yeah, yes. Okay, yeah.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Heather, I mean, Stephen has answered her question, but she was asking, Heather Doherty, are you aware of any examples of downward pressure on grape prices for growers this year?
Yes, yes, and we saw that in 23 as well, where there was more grapes produced than people were able to actually. And this is another issue. That there is a lack of wineries have tank space based on what we think we're going to be producing. When you get big bumpy years like 2023. There was more grapes, and the same happened in 18 as well. There was more grapes produced than we actually had tank space in wineries to make the wine. So there was some grapes left on the vines, and you did have an issue where people running out of tank space. And what was happening then, of course, it was pushing the price down because people couldn't buy and didn't want to buy grapes, and prices did drop. I believe some people from the 23 harvest made so much that they couldn't bottle it all, and some was left in tank for 2024, and that affected what people are buying in 24 as well. But I've also heard the same in 25, that some of the prices have slumped a bit, where people can't sell grapes because obviously people are holding on to a lot of stock, and 25 was a pretty good year as well. It's a pretty big year. I haven't got the figures through on that way, but it's a pretty big year.
Is there anything else you wanted to follow up with that, Heather, or?
Yes, just is there such a thing as a sort of average price per kilo if you're a grower hoping to sell your grapes?
If you've got a sparkling wine, then it's usually, as Stephen said, no. Anything from 2.5 to 3.5, but it really does. I mean, Stephen's got a point. There is a price. But it starts at one point and finishes at another, and it can go higher than that and it can go lower than that, and it really depends on the vintage and what the demand is. Is there less grapes available, and people desperately need grapes, they'll pay more. But so it varies.
What's the lowest price per kilo, for example, that you have personally, been aware of?
I've actually been offered grapes for nothing. Yeah, there you go. Stephen said the same for free. Yeah. So in 2018 and 2023, people were saying, please just, I don't want to see it rot on the vine. Please come and take it. And people were doing exactly that. Yeah. Where they had space to put them in, which most of us didn't.
And can I slip in another question while I'm here? I'm based in Surrey, and we have producers of varying size, but a lot of smaller ones. And looking at your work on especially yields, that sort of hit home with me. I just wonder that a lot of them that doesn't seem to be on their radar in terms of what they're thinking of, because they don't quite have that commercial attitude in the same way that a bigger or just more commercial outfit would do. I don't want to damn them with saying they're hobby winemakers, but it is a very different game that they're in, I think.
Yeah, I know, I completely agree. I think if you're a small or a boutique producer, you may be an owner manager, so therefore the income that's coming in is going to pay your salary. So therefore you you're not necessarily an investor that's looking for a profit out of it. You might be just looking for a salary out of it. It might be something that's a lifestyle choice for you. But a lot of the smaller vineyards also have cellar doors. And if you have a cellar door, of course, you're selling your wine at almost 100. You're getting 100% of what you want to sell it for. If you're a big commercial outfit and you're selling wines to supermarkets, to big chains, and obviously you're taking a significant hit on its retail price. Whereas cellar door, unless you're offering a discount for people buying multiples, you're at 80, 90, 100% of your retail price there. So you're getting more for your product. And I think any model of any vineyard, personally, unless you're very big, should have a degree of cellar door sales, where you're bringing in a certain percentage of your sales that way, because that really helps ameliorate out your wine prices and what your income you're earning from that slight high price. And that works really well for smaller people with less wine to sell.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've just asked Carolyn to just unmute herself, because when you were asking about what other alternative grape varieties success, Carolyn came in first. Do you want to go in, Carolyn, with your suggestion?
Thank you, Andrew. Yes, I was thinking of Burn Valley up in Norfolk. They do quite a lot on the still wine front, and I've tried several of their. I think they do an unoaked Solaris and an oaked one, and I've shown it to consumers, and yeah, I've had a very positive reaction. I think somebody else in the feed then said it's probably us in the trade who seem to be sniffy about hybrids, and most consumers don't really know what it is. It's just a grape, and if you just don't talk about that, and just say, look, try this, I think that's probably the best way to sort of convince them to look at it.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and I completely agree with you. I've come across some that are brilliant. They're really good and make really nice wines. So why shouldn't we be shouting about those? And actually, maybe there's a story and a narrative that could talk about those as well. So you're right. You don't have to put the grape on the bottle. And you're right, the consumer doesn't always have much of a clue what the grape variety would taste like, as long as you've got a nice tasting note. So yeah, you're right.
But I think with Burn Valley, their Solaris is their most planted grape variety, and so they really have focused on that. So
yeah, good for them. Yeah, that's really good. We need more people to do the same, in my opinion. But there you go. Thank you.
The other was Pedder made a couple of comments. Pedder, are you still there? Do you want to chat with Sam about your thoughts?
Yeah, I can do that. Hi, Sam. Yeah, first of all, I agree with Carolyn that Solaris can be quite interesting, and as can stuff like Sauvignon Gris and numerous other things, what we see here in Denmark, for instance. Another point, I think, is that if we look at these grapes that are bred years ago in the US, a good place to look is what they do in Nova Scotia with Lac du Blanc, which is so ultra important for them, like a third of the plantations. And now we're talking still wines also in the UK. What they've been doing is creating their own brand, Tidal Bay, where name is not put on the bottle. So that's another way of at least utilizing hybrid wines for very good quality. And then I had to make a small point that about what they're doing in Switzerland. They have quite a big focus on hybrid PV grapes down there.
Great. Good for them. Yeah, that's really interesting. I know of some in Switzerland, but yeah, maybe I should. Feels like a bit of research needs to be done there. But yeah, if you think that they're actually majorly focusing on it, then yeah.
Thank you.
That's really interesting. Thank you.
And Wink, did you want to come in with your comment that you made regarding French wine regions?
Well, in the little regions that I know rather well, especially Jura, with the large sort of organic natural wine movements that there are there, hybrids have become a sort of natural extension to that. And so many of them are fed up with having unbelievably poor harvests for a combination of frost and then rainy summers. That they have just, in desperation almost, sought what hybrids they might plant. So some of them are planting the older ones. I've been presented with Sayval, like this is you'll have never have heard of Sayval, but it's an extraordinary old hybrid. And I sort of say to them, well, actually, there's quite a bit of it in England. They look at
and does very well in some areas.
Complete amazement. But I do know a very good Sayval from the Jura. I know one that has been made under the veil, like Vin Jaune, from Sayval. So it can be done. And what's more, it appeals to the younger generation, the trendies. There's even a hybrid wine fair now that is on the side of another. It's what they call an off in France, on the side of another organic wine fair. And people have exhibited their wines from not just the Jura, but from all over France, from Switzerland to, and a couple of other places. They make a big marketing deal about giving them fancy names, fancy labels, because they're all Vin de France, they're not Appellation. And consumers are loving it. And those that are willing to pay for natural wines are willing to pay for hybrid natural wines. Okay. So it's sort of part of that movement over there. Yeah. I don't see why there can't be a little offshoot in England of that.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, tying it into the natural wine movement, and which is growing, as we know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you.
And we're just rather than growing everybody, I don't know whether Christy's around. Christy, are you there? Do you want to mention your experience in the US market quickly?
Let me go on camera. Sorry. I guess I won't be on camera. So yes, so I'm based in the US, and I was typing a comment into Wink's point. There's a fair here called ABV, Anything But Vinifera, and it is filled with young people. I am easily the oldest person in the room, by perhaps twice my age, and it's the excitement around hybrid grapes and where you can grow them and how you can grow them. It's one of, I find, the bright spots within the US industry. I mean, certainly it's not hugely commercial, but I think there are opportunities to grow and make wines that are kind of on trend with what a lot of younger people are looking for. So it's, I think it's definitely worth looking at. And it's probably a way to reach that sort of more mid-tier price point with wines and styles that are of interest to lots of people.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And actually Plumpton is, that does make a lot of sense, because Plumpton is about to plant a 10-hectare vineyard, of which we've only planted 1 hectare so far. So we've got the ability, and we've done this trial of peaweeds as well, we've got the ability to actually do a big block of 1 or 2 peaweeds and actually really make, really trying to get behind that as well, and get behind that on the research as well, but actually proving it commercially. So yeah, no, thank you. That's really interesting.
Thank you, Christy. There's Richard Lane. I'm not sure Richard's still with us, but he was asking if any signs of prices lowering for the surplus 23 vintage. He believes that consumers need a chance to taste English wines at non-premium prices. English wine feels overly brand focused. Would not better appreciation of English wine among more consumers help build the brand?
I completely and utterly agree. We do need to bring down to a price point where people feel they can try it and get into the style. Is it going to happen? I honestly don't know. I think if there are people that really, really need to sell, they will, and you do see some of that happening. And there are some brands that have built themselves up to the position where they've got enough volume that they can actually bring some of the prices down now. So you do see it a little bit coming through, and you will see it a little bit coming through with some. I would say on the whole, my personal opinion, the majority of English brands will probably not and hold on to their price points they've worked hard to achieve. But there will be some that will, and I think slowly over time, the problem is it's so expensive to make English wine. Unless you've got a volume production going on, then it's really hard to then bring those prices down. If your volume, you've got good efficiencies of scale, and you've got volume, and you've built your wine brand around that, and you're
your vineyards and your wineries around that as your production, then you can. Sorry, I'm waffling a bit. I'm trying to work this out in my head. I think some can, and they've positioned themselves, their business, to do exactly that, and they can slowly bring those prices down. But a lot can't. They're in that place where they just can't make the wines cheap enough to bring it down. Then they make a big loss, and they can't afford to do that. So they're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Thank you, Sam. I've just asked Stephen to unmute himself because he has responded regarding that, and he's also been, as you've seen, answering a lot of the questions. So thank you, Stephen. But I see you've answered Richard's, or you replied to Richard's question as well.
I'm a bit too. This is my specialist subject after all. I think we're in a bit of a trough. I mean, I think Sam's talk set out a lot of the issues we have to deal with, but there are financial problems with quite a few of the major. I mean, Ridgeview is in administration. Hambledon got bought out, was bust and got taken over. Chapel Down are retrenching on their winery plans. Gusbourne have abandoned 30 hectares of vines in West Sussex because they don't want the stock. Wealdon Wines, I could go on, but I think we're going to see exactly what we saw with Lamberhurst in the 90s. Who had their store completely full with over 1 million bottles of wine. They slashed the price, only still wine in those days, from £2.99 to £1.99, and it virtually disappeared overnight. And I think you're going to find distressed sales, and hard as it may be, you can't keep building sheds and air conditioning and forklifts and insurance and finance.
You can't.
You have got to jump overboard at some stage. It will happen, but I think the big thing, I don't think pewees are the future for the bulk of English wine growing. Looking at my stats, I've just done a lot of research on this. The southeast, where 70–80% of all wines are produced, has 4.2% of pewees in a very few vineyards. Wales, for instance, has 54.6% of pewees and hybrids. Sorry, I should say pewees and hybrids. Most of that is Saval, of course. The people who want to grow pewees think that they are cheap to grow. They don't need to spray them. And they're hoping to get an advantage in yields because they're in regions that are not naturally higher yielding. In the southeast, where the bulk of the vineyards are and where the bulk of the vineyards will stay, I think personally that Pinot and Chardonnay are the two varieties that will save the day. If you can produce wines like some of the major people that are producing good, even some of the minor people, but good wines from Pinot and Chardonnay, maybe Pinot Gris as well, I think there is a really good future. If every bottle of Chablis was English, you know what I mean, and every bottle of Burgundy was English, it would solve a lot of problems. And if you can sell your wine for between £25 and £45 a bottle, still wine, then that is a really good plan for the future. We have got to, but Sam, you've outlined a lot of the problems, but people who can't afford to grow the grapes will disappear soon. At some stage.
That is true, but if you can get, but I know I agree with you. I'm not sure I agree that all of us can sell at £35–40.
No, I know, I appreciate that.
And that, yeah, no, thank you. But then that does mean, doesn't it? We have to do something about.
But New Zealand wine never got anywhere until Cloudy Bay came along.
Yeah, this is true.
English still wine is getting somewhere because people like Danbury and Balfour and Chapel and Gusbourne and some of the majors are producing really good. I don't know Bolney's range quite so well, but are producing really I think good value for money Burgundies in inverted commas from Pinot Noir, obviously.
Yeah.
I had a bottle of Kitts Coty 17 the other
And how much was that?
I think it's about £38.
About 38, yeah.
Still,
yeah.
This was for 12 MWs. The 21 Club, as it's known, it went around the room and people thought it was Chablis.
Yeah, brilliant. And you're right, it's amazing. That wine is absolutely amazing. And I think you're right. And I think if we can do that and we can have those Burgundy, Pinot Noir, Chablis style wines, I completely agree with you, 100%. And that's where my drinking palate is. But I still think we've got to get those yields up so we can get people to put those lower ones in to bring people in.
But my data. You've been talking about the 25% that can do it. Then and that keeps rising.
Then more can do it, and that's the point.
Year upon year.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of good data about, if anyone's interested, on my, sorry to advertise, englishwine.com under reports. All my vintage reports going back to 2016 are there.
Yeah, Stephen is by far the best data collector in the UK of English and Welsh wines, so
Almost,
I'll pick you up on that one because you
almost
are.
only.
Not
Anyway.
only, but yeah,
Yeah.
you collect the most.
Yeah, great session.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Over to you, Liz.
Great. Thank you so much, Sam. That was interesting, informative, provocative a bit, and a real insider's view. I think everyone's valued that so much. And where these sessions work so well is when there's a discussion prompted afterwards, and that was just so good. So huge thank you to you, and very good luck with all that you're going to do and everyone in English Wine in the future. Before we go, a quick mention of our next session, which is on November the 4th, when we have Steve Smith, Master of Wine from New Zealand, whose topic is a little hard to explain, but shall we say the title is Democratizing Fine Wine and Regenics, which is a new approach to sustainability, organics, all sorts of things. It will be stimulating, I'm sure. So please do sign up for that. The invitation will go out tomorrow or the next day. We look forward to seeing you there. And Sam, thank you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. It's good to talk with you all. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.